So now we're up to Daf Nun Vav Hamid Beis. And we said that you have to turn upside down all the mitos of the bias, not just the mitos that he sleeps in, but all the mitos of the bias. That means the mitos that generally speaking you would sleep in. He's not sleeping in those mitos. But Arsa Degado, which is designated for Mazel and not for Shchiva, is not included in the Chi of Kfir. And I'll prove it to you. Let's say you have a bed designated for utensils. You put utensils on top of the bed, and you don't require Kfir Samita. So we will not turn the mita that's designated for holding utensils upside down because it's not designated for sitting or sleeping. And the same rule will apply to the darga, the arsa darga, the god of the darga. Eli kasha, but if we have an objection to raise against Ula's definition of dargash, which eventually we're going to reject, hakasha. This is the question that makes it difficult. The Sanya we learned in a brisa of Shimon Gamliel Omer dargash matir karbito. The Avel has to, shall we say, untie the karbita. The karbita are the loops, right? So that the matzah, which I think is the mattress on which he sleeps, is tied down with these straps through the loops. And once he loosens those loops, then hu nofil mi'elam. Then the mattress on which he sleeps will fall down by itself, because what's holding it up are these straps that are tied down into the loops. Now it's interesting. This brisa quotes from Shimon Gamliel. Why? Because Rav Shimon Gamliel, although he agrees that we don't require Kfiyas Hamita with regard to the Dargash, but he does require that we loosen the loops, and that's sufficient. Now, if we go back for a minute to the Brisa on Nun Vav and Aleph, it says that lo mitaso bilvadu kofa elakol mitos sheyesh lo b'sof bayis kofa, implying that even the dargash has to be turned upside down. Rav Shimon Gamliel says it's sufficient just to loosen the loops. So according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, the dargash is not treated in the same way as all the other beds in the house, even during Avelis. If you're going to hold like Ula, that dargash is arsa de gadahu, karbitin mi isle. According to Ula, the dargash is an ordinary bed. It's structured in the same way. It's just designed for mazel. But does it have these loops? He says, "Ha'im yesh lemita mazel ritzuos." Does it have these straps that go into the loops? Harei kechol mita regila she'amatzah mechuva li'aruchos ha'mita v'ofen kavua. It's not like the bed, the mattress on which he sleeps is on a temporary basis. You put it into the loops and then you lower it. It's a regular classic bed, so it doesn't have karbitin. So from the fact that Rav Shimon Gamliel says about dargash that you're matir the karbitin, you see that dargosh is not arsa degada, which is a regular bed. So a regular, ordinary bed is not just attached in a temporary way through these karbitin, but it's meant to remain permanently in place. So it wouldn't be made with straps and loops that are holding it up such that release the loops and then it automatically falls. Now I suspect, and we'll see if the sugya could bear me out, that in the light of Rav Shimon Gamliel in this price, a dargosh is some sort of a portable bed, like a cot, where you fold it up and you transport it. It's not permanent in one spot, and therefore they made it in a way that it's very easy to take it apart by loosening the loops. So at this point, the Gemara is stuck. What is a dargosh? And for that, we need Ravin. So Ravin is now going to tell me what is the definition of a dargosh. He also Ravin. Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, as he often did. Omar, he declares to his colleagues in Bavel, Shilpi, I asked, back in Eretz Yisrael, what is a dargosh? Lahu Rabbanon. So one of the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael, I asked, what's his name? We can identify him. Rav Tachlifa Bar Ma'arov Shmei. Tavishachiv B'shuka Ditzaloi. This particular individual, by the name of Rav Tachlifa, was a person who frequented the leather maker's market. And he knew a lot about leather and goods that are made of leather. Matzui b'shvakim shel ma'abdei oretz. The Amali, and he tells me, my dargash, arsa diksala, a bed of leather. So I guess what happens is, mita she'amatza shala osimi or, it's got a wooden frame, and in the sideboards it's got holes, and they put a leather sheet with straps along its edges. And it was suspended from the frame by inserting the straps through the holes in the sideboards and tying them. The sideboards would then be inserted into the legs to form a cot-like bed. When one untied the straps, the bed fell by itself, and these straps are loops to which Rav Shimon Gamliel referred in the Brisa when he said Matir Karbita. Now, the Masechet, based on the Ritva, has a whole shtickle Torah here about why it would be impossible to require that during Abelus, this Arsa Ditzala be turned upside down. Because he says if you turned it upside down, the way you turned all the beds upside down, then Yiskalko Matzah Ha'or. This covering, this leather sheet, would get ruined milachos hakarka, because he turned it upside down and the ground is moist, and therefore, according to Tanakama, you don't have to turn it upside down. All you do is you set it up zakifa al sido, according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, even though you don't do a kfir, but you have to be matir the ritzuos, so that the matzah falls and the sala, meaning the R that leather sheet would not be in direct contact with the ground and it would not spoil. Itmar, Ezu mita v'ezu dargash. What's the difference between a mita and a dargash? Rav Yirmiyah, mita misargin osal gavim. We attach the ropes over it. We wrap around the sideboards of the bed frame, these ropes. So we don't put it through the sideboards, but rather around the sideboards. So this is an ordinary bed made of ropes that extend at intervals across the entire length and the width of the frame. And these ropes are held in place by being wrapped around the frame and are interwoven in a woof and warp design. Here he has a picture of it. Cushions are then placed over the ropes and they create a mattress. So this is the regular bed. However, dargosh, misargin oso migufo, koshrim, yesh haruchos ha'etz shel misgeret nekavim. So it means we insert the straps at the edges of the leather sheet through the holes in the sideboards and tie them, but we do not attach the straps by wrapping them over the sideboards. And this distinction of Rav Yirmiyah would support Rav Tachlifa's explanation of dargosh, because the method of attachment that Rav Yirmiyah prescribes for dargosh is suitable for a bed of leather, but not for an ordinary bed of ropes. And that's called dargosh misargin oso migufo. And now the Gemara rejects Rabbi Yomi. Masechet. We learned in a mission in Kalim, clay eitz me'emasai. When is the Gemara Malacha of clay eitz? And that's when they are Mekabel Tumah. Before the Gemara Malacha, they're not Mekabel Tumah. Hamita Harisa, a bed and a what's it called for a child? An harisa, a cradle. Oh, a cradle maybe. Misha Yishufam Bi'ar Hadab. Yishufa means to smoothen them with fish skin. He says, Sha'oro mat'im l'malacha zu. The skin of a fish, is very appropriate for this kind of a malacha. So what's the Gemara's kasha here? The imita mistareges al gava lama shifas or hadag. If the ropes of a bed are attached over the frame, and that was Rabbi Yirmiyah, is why do we need the rubbing of fish skin? Since the wooden frame is always covered with rope, its appearance is immaterial. It's always covered. Therefore, we must conclude that the ropes of an ordinary bed are not attached by wrapping their ends around the frame. So now we've rejected Rabbi Yirmiyah. And we have to come up with another distinction between the dargish and a regular bed. Ela hava ha migufan. Both a mita and a dargosh have these, what do we call them, nekavim, and he says, we bind it from within them, through these holes in the sideboards. So what's the difference between a mita and a dargosh? Mita iyule ve'afuke bebizyane. Dargosh iyule ve'afuke ve'avaksa. In the case of a mita, the ropes are threaded in and out of slits in the sideboard. In the case of a dargosh, the straps from the leather sheet are threaded in and out of loops that hang from the holes of the sideboards. So he has two pictures here, one of a mita and one of a dargosh. Amar Rab Yaakov Baracha Amar Rebbe Mita Shenakliteh Yotzim Zokfa V'Dayim. A bed whose double posts protrude, a two-poster canopy bed, the mourner stands it upright on its end, and that suffices. He says, "Hayumamidim shnei mitos, hanikram b'rosh hamishan naklitim, echad b'rosh hamita v'asheni l'magloseha, b'rosh shnei amotos, hayumufutzolim kimin karnayim, u'meniach li'orech hamita me'al hamotos, mot shlishi, v'al zeh pori sadin," like a canopy. V'yesh hanoshim shoyim achavrim motos elu lemata at lamita atzma, v'imkein nimtza she'avel yuchal lichos mitazu. Right, you have these motos, these poles that are connected to the mita. If he turns it upside down, it's going to be impossible. And therefore, so Omer Rav Yaakov Bar Idi, Omer Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Aloch Rav Shem Gamliel, that the ovel just has to be matir, the karbitin, and the matzah, which is made of or, falls by itself. And this leads us to the Mishnah of Hanodim in a or. So a person takes a neder, nodim in a year, that he won't go into the city. Is mutali kanis the tchuma shaliyah. The tchuma of the year is a circumference of 2,000 amma around the city. He's allowed to enter that, but also likanis ibura. Ibura is a circumference of 70 amma plus a mashahu close to the city, around the city. That he's not allowed to enter. I know them in a bias, also in agah. If a person takes a ned that he won't enter the house, he doesn't have to go that far. And there's a halal, an empty space in the Pesach Habayis, and that empty airspace is not included in this ned. But also in agah, ulefnim. But the empty space on the other side of the door towards the inside is included under the Easter Neder. The Gemara asks me, how do we know that the 70 Amma period around the belt, around the city is considered part of the city? Or Rabbi Yochanan and Yoshua, it says, Yoshua b'Yericho. And the Gemara says, what does it mean that Yoshua was B'Yericho? My B'Yericho, Ilem B'Yericho Mamish, he entered into the city of Yericho. Then Haksiv, the pasuk says in the next part of the pasuk. No, not the next part of the pasuk. Next part of the presentation. The Yericho so garrison was Sugaret. Right, it was completely closed. It was sealed, and no one left, and no one entered. Ein Yotzev, ein Ba. So it's impossible that Yoshua went into the city itself. So how could it be that Yoshua B'Yericho, El Shmamino Be'ibura? He was outside the city of Yericho. Gemara asks, Ema Filu B'Tchuma. Maybe he entered into the 2,000 Amma around the city, and that's called Yericho. Gemara answers, Haksiv B'Tchuma. The pasuk says, with regard to Tchumen, Umadosa Michutz La'ir. The Chachamim derived from this pasuk the Alpayim Amma as a shear of Tchumen, and that's called Chutz La'ir. So the Tchumen of Alpayim Amma is outside the city. So Dafka the Ibura Shal Ir is considered inside the city. Hanodim and Abayis Eino Osir Element Agafel Lefnim, Aval Min Agafel Achutz Lo. Apparently, there's no Easter to enter into that area that's on the other side of the door. Masav Ramari, the Torah says in Vayikra Yadal V'Yotza Kohen Min Abayis, and the rest of the pasuk says on Pesach Abayis v'Hiskiras Abayis Shivas Yom. All right, so we're talking about Nigei Batim. Let's be medayik. If it would have said V'Yotza Kohen Min Abayis Yochel, I would think that after the Kohen saw the nega Yelech Lebeso, he just goes home, the Yazgir, and he decides to quarantine the bayis as a bayis hamenuga. He'll just simply close the door, and this is the bayis hamenuga. And he adds here, Yidei Chevel Aroch, a long rope. Oh, Yemane Shliach Sheyiska B'Mkomo. If he doesn't want to lock up the house, he appoints an agent to do so. Talmud Lomar, therefore the Torah says, V'yotza, after it says V'yotza Kohen Min Abayis, it says El Pesach Abayis V'Hizkir. In other words, Lo Yishtav V'Skira. He should close the door immediately and go out to the Pesach Habayis. That's V'yotza Kohen Min Abayis El Pesach Habayis. If it would have said V'yotza Kohen El Pesach Habayis, and it didn't say Min Habayis, Yochel, I would think Yamod Tachas Hamashko Fiyasgir. The Kohen could stand under the lintel. Now, lintel here is called a mashko. The Kohen leaves the door, leaves the house, shuts the door, closes off the house for a period of 7 days. At the end of this period, the Kohen re-examines the discoloration to see what happened to it. With a long rope attached to the door of the afflicted house, the Kohen shall exit from the house to the entrance of the house, and he should close off the house for a 7-day period. So the phrase to the entrance of the house implies that the Kohen must stand at the entrance to the house when he closes it off. Talmud Lomer min habayis. Achiyetzim min habayis kulo. So he doesn't remain standing under the mashkal. Haketzad. So where should he stand at the time that he's masgir the bais? Omei b'tzada mashkal. He stands on the outside of the house, close to the mashkal, for yazgir. Uminayin she'im, if he doesn't stand right near the mashkal, but rather holach l'beis over his gear, osha omay tachas hashaku v'hiskir. But he's supposed to be mitzad mashkal, but here he's standing under the mashkal. Shes gero muskar, but the emed there is a chalos hezger. Talmud lover v'yotza kol min habayis al pesach habayis v'hiskir es habayis mikomakom. So it's always considered a hezger, even if he didn't do the hezger exactly the way the Torah demanded it. And from the fact that the Torah requires that the Kohen leave the house, and he leaves also the mashkov, he shouldn't be standing under the mashkov, but outside the mashkov, we see that the Chalala Pesach is considered part of the bayis. The Chalal Pesach means the empty space underneath the mashkal. And our Mishnah says that a Nedarim and a bayis is allowed to enter into that part of the Agaf L'Chut. And the more answers, Shani Gavi bayis, it's that drush in the Brisa that he should leave the area of the Chalal Mashkal. That's because of the extra words in the pasuk. If it just would have said Yotzak Kohen El Pesach HaBayis, there'd be enough that he closes the door, enters into the Chalal Pesach, and he does the Hezger from there. But since the pasuk said Min HaBayis, the Yotzak Kohen Min HaBayis El Pesach HaBayis, it's coming to teach me that he needs more of a Yitzhiyah than generally he would require, and he has to go out of the Bais Kulo, even out of the area of the Halal that's under the Mashkov. So that's a separate din in Hezger. But as far as the universal definition of Bais, once he closes the door behind him, even though he's standing in the airspace below the Mashkov, that's Chutz LaBais, and therefore it's not included as Neder. And this leads us to the Mishnah on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, which in Mirz Hashem we'll pick up tomorrow. Let me wish you a happy Chanukah.